I'm Liana. I started driving Uber after my divorce because it let me work nights and pay bills without asking anyone for help. I was cautious. Dashcam on. Doors locked until I confirmed the name. No off-app stops. No letting strangers crowd my window. I'd done enough late shifts to know most danger shows up pretending to be normal. It was a humid Sunday, close to midnight, when I got a request from a mid-range motel off the interstate. Account name, Kelsey, rating fine. Drop off in a quiet subdivision about 15 minutes away. I hate motel pickups, but it looked simple. I pulled under the lobby lights and waited with my doors locked. Nobody came out of the front doors. Then 2 men appeared from the side of the building like they'd been waiting out of sight. Between them was a young woman, barefoot, thin hoodie, hair hanging in her face. One man kept a hand at the back of her neck, guiding her. It wasn't supportive. It was steering. The taller guy leaned to my passenger window and smiled too wide. "Uber for Kelsey," I asked. "Are you Kelsey?" He shook his head. "She ordered it. She's not doing great." The woman looked up at me for a split second, not drunk eyes, scared eyes. When she shifted her sleeves, I saw red marks around her wrist. My stomach sank. I said, "I need the rider to confirm the name." The taller guy's smile tightened. "Panic attacks. She can't talk. Just take us to the address." He said us, not her. I should have canceled. But I was in a motel lot with 2 men too close to my doors and a girl who looked like she needed a witness, more than she needed another stranger who drove away. So I hit the in-app safety shield, started audio recording, shared the trip with my brother, and then unlocked. They got in fast. The shorter man sat beside her, pinning her toward the door. The taller man sat directly behind me and said, "Go." As we pulled out, he asked, "You got cameras in here?" Like he was asking if I had gum. "Front and back," I said. He made an annoyed sound. I tried the safest test I know. "Hey, Kelsey," I said on purpose. "AC up or down?" The shorter man answered instantly, "Down." The woman's mouth opened and he squeezed her thigh until she shut it again. At the first light, I checked the mirror. The taller man's eyes were fixed on my face, and his phone was low by his thigh like he was recording me. He saw me look and said, calm, "You good?" I lied. "All good." His eyes flicked to my dashcam light. "Turn that off," he said softly. I told him it was for insurance and safety. He said, still soft, "Turn it off or I'll report you. I'll say you were drunk. They'll deactivate you." I didn't answer. I kept driving. A few minutes in, the shorter man said, "Stop at the ATM up here." I said, "No stops unless it's in the app." The taller guy laughed once. "You're strict. That's cute." The woman made a tiny sound like she was trying to speak. The shorter man pressed his forearm across her lap harder and hissed something at her. When she turned her face away, I saw a faint bruise along her jaw. When I zoomed the route out, the last turn peeled away from the houses toward new construction lots, empty streets, no finished homes, only dirt and utility poles. The kind of place that looks fine on GPS and feels like nowhere in real life. Like he could read my fear, the taller man leaned forward until his breath warmed my ear. "Don't get creative. We got your plates. We know where you picked us up." Then, something white slid from the woman's sleeve and dropped onto the floor mat. The shorter man immediately tried to crush it under his shoe. I hit a pothole on purpose and it skittered toward the center hump, where he couldn't reach it without shifting. At the next light, I said, louder, "Kelsey, are you okay? Do you want me to take you somewhere safe?" I didn't say police. I didn't want to force her into a yes or no that could get her hurt. She stared straight ahead, shaking, and whispered, "Please, don't go there." The taller man chuckled. "Hear that? Just drive." The closer we got, the darker the streets became. Traffic thinned. The taller guy started giving directions that didn't match the app. "Take the next right, then the left after that." When I ignored him, he said, "You trying to be a hero? Stay in your lane." I decided I wasn't driving into a dead grid. I drove past the turn like I missed it. The taller guy's voice snapped. "That was it," I said, GPS rerouted. It was a bad lie, and we all knew it. He grabbed my headrest with both hands and shook it. "Turn around, now." The car wobbled. My hand stayed locked on the wheel. He leaned forward farther, and for a second, his hand brushed my shoulder, like he was considering grabbing the wheel. I slammed my palm on the horn and kept it there, not to get help yet, just to make the inside of the car feel less private. Cars ahead started moving around me like I was an annoyance, and I used that, staying in the middle of traffic, refusing to take quiet side streets. The shorter man kept whispering to the woman, and she started rocking slightly, a tiny motion like she was trying to stay conscious or stay brave. I aimed for the only place I knew would be bright and staffed, the hospital ER 2 miles ahead. I didn't call 911 because I was terrified they'd hear the dispatcher and decide to do something in the next 10 seconds. Instead, I pressed the voice button on my steering wheel and said clearly, "Call emergency." The car started dialing through the speakers. The taller man heard the tone and yanked my hair hard enough to make my eyes water. "Hang up," he said, voice suddenly raw. I didn't. I kept driving. When the hospital sign came into view, the shorter man started yanking the door handle like he wanted out. The taller man punched the back of my seat. The woman pressed herself against the door and mouthed, "Thank you," tears spilling fast now. I rolled into the ER drop-off lane under cameras where nurses and a security guard were outside. I threw the car into park and laid on the horn, a long, ugly blast that made every head in that lane snap toward us. I jumped out and yelled, "Help! She needs help! Call the police!" The shorter man tried to drag her out by the hoodie. She fought for the first time, weak but real, and the security guard sprinted over with his radio up. The taller man bolted out of my back door and ran between parked cars. The shorter man hesitated, saw the guard closing in, and ran too, leaving her half falling out of my back seat. She collapsed on the curb, shaking, and kept saying, "Don't let them take me." A nurse wrapped her in a blanket and asked her name. She gave a name that wasn't Kelsey. Police arrived, pulled my dash cam footage, and took my statement. The paper she dropped was a torn motel notepad with her real name and a phone number labeled "Call Mom." An officer later told me she had an active missing person report from 2 counties over. Nobody handed me a neat ending, but I know I almost followed a GPS into a place where nobody would have heard her, and how close I came to doing nothing because it was easier. My brother met me at the hospital 20 minutes later because of the shared trip link, and seeing a familiar face is when my knees finally went weak. I reported the ride to Uber and got the usual scripted messages, but the detective who took the footage told me the dash cam and the hospital cameras were the only reason this wouldn't be my word against theirs. I stopped driving nights after that. I can handle rude passengers. I can't handle people who treat the back seat like a cage. I drove Uber in 2019 after my warehouse job cut hours. I wasn't naive, but I had that stupid confidence a lot of guys have. Like, because I'm bigger than most people, and I've been in a few fights, I'm automatically safe. The night that cured me started with a request that looked almost too normal. It was a Wednesday around 2:30 a.m. when I got a pickup from a downtown office building. Not a bar, not a club, not a motel. An office tower with a security desk and bright lobby lights. The account name was Brandon, rating decent, destination 20 minutes out toward the edge of town. I figured it was a late shift employee headed home. I pulled up to the curb by the revolving doors and waited with the doors locked like I always did. A minute later, a guy in business casual walked out like he belonged there. Button-down shirt, slacks, messenger bag, hair neatly combed. He looked tired more than anything. He checked my license plate, opened the rear passenger side door, and sat diagonally behind me, which instantly lowered my guard. "You the Uber?" he asked. I said yeah, confirmed the name, and started the trip. For the first 5 minutes, he was quiet, tapping on his phone. Then he started asking questions that didn't feel like small talk. He asked if I did nights often, if I had regular routes, if Uber had any live monitoring, and if the app flags weird stops automatically. It was the kind of curiosity you'd expect from someone who'd never used rideshare before, except he asked it like he was trying to learn the rules of a game. I kept my answers short. He hummed like he was filing the information away. When we left the downtown grid and got onto a long stretch lined with closed warehouses and dark lots, he asked, "You got a dash cam?" I pointed to the small one clipped near my rearview mirror. He stared at it for a beat and said, "Smart." But it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like someone noticing an obstacle. A few minutes later, he said, "Hey, can you make a quick stop? I left my badge back at the building." I told him I couldn't add a stop unless it was in the app. He said he'd tip cash. I said no. He sighed like I was being difficult on purpose, then went quiet again. I remember thinking, great, annoyed passenger, whatever. Then he did something that made my shoulders tighten. He started counting under his breath. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft mumble, like he was timing traffic lights. I glanced in the mirror and realized he wasn't watching me. He was watching behind us. When we hit a red light at a big empty intersection, a dark SUV rolled up and stopped a little too close. I noticed, because I always notice when someone stops too close at night. The counting stopped. The guy behind me leaned forward slightly and said, very softly, "When the light turns green, don't slam it." My stomach dropped. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer. His right hand slipped into his messenger bag and stayed there. The light flipped green and I did the opposite of what he said. I hit the gas hard. My car lurched forward. The SUV surged too, matching my acceleration, like it was on a string attached to my bumper. The guy in the back seat swore under his breath and sat back like I'd ruined a plan. I took the next right into a brighter stretch with a gas station and a couple of all-night drive-thrus, trying to put witnesses near me. "No, not here," he snapped, and that was the first time his voice dropped the tired office guy mask. It was sharp, irritated, like I'd disobeyed a supervisor. I kept driving. The SUV turned with me. Now it wasn't just maybe coincidence. It was following. My heart started doing that weird thing where it feels like it's beating in your throat. He leaned forward until his breath warmed the back of my ear and said, "Relax. Nobody wants to hurt you. We just need the car." The way he said it, calm, rehearsed, made it worse, like he'd said it before. I told him to get out. He laughed once, a quick little laugh like I'd told a joke. He shifted, and I saw his hand come out of the bag holding something dark and rectangular. In my head it registered as gun before I even processed details. He didn't point it, but he held it where I could see it in the mirror, like a reminder. "Don't make it messy," he said. My hands went cold on the wheel. I didn't call 911. I know that sounds insane, but in that moment I was terrified that the second he heard a dispatcher's voice, he'd decide he had to act now. Instead, I hit the in-app safety button and started the audio recording without taking my eyes off the road. I also did the only other thing I could think of. I drove like I was trying to get to the most inconvenient, public place possible. I aimed toward a 24-hour grocery store I knew had a security guard at the door and cameras over the lot. The guy noticed where I was going and his calm started cracking. "Don't go there," he said. "You're making this harder than it has to be." I ignored him. The SUV behind us stayed close, not tailgating aggressively, but close enough that I could feel it. At one light, it crept forward so far I could see the driver's silhouette over the hood in my rearview mirror. The guy in my back seat leaned forward and grabbed my headrest with both hands. "You're not listening," he said, and shook it hard enough that my neck snapped forward. My reflexes almost made me slam the brakes, but I fought that instinct because I knew that's what they wanted. Me stopped, boxed in. I kept rolling, slow and steady, staying with traffic, refusing to peel off into empty side streets. He shifted his weight like he was deciding whether to climb forward. His arm came around the side of my seat and his hand went toward my gear shift. I slapped it away. That's when he swung the dark object at me. It wasn't a gun. It was a heavy battery pack, like a portable jump starter, and it cracked into my shoulder with a dull shock of pain that made my arm go numb for a second. Stars flashed in my vision. I shouted, more out of shock than bravery, and I laid on the horn. Not a quick beep, full horn, continuous, obnoxious. Cars ahead started moving around me, heads turning. The guy cursed and hit the side of my seat again, not as hard, more like he was trying to intimidate me into pulling over. I kept the horn down and aimed straight into the grocery store lot. At the entrance, the SUV slowed like it was hesitating, like the driver didn't want to follow into a place with cameras and people. The guy in my back seat must have realized that too, because he suddenly reached over and locked his own door. That detail still sticks with me because it told me everything. He didn't want to jump out and run. He wanted me trapped in a stopped car, somewhere quiet, where the SUV could pull up beside us. I rolled deeper into the lot, straight toward the front doors, where the brightest lights were. I could see the security guard standing by the carts. He looked up at my blaring horn and started walking toward me. The guy behind me panicked. He swung the battery pack again, this time toward my head. I ducked and it smashed into my driver's side window, cracking the glass into a spider web. I felt tiny pieces fall onto my arm. My heart was pounding so hard it made me nauseous. I slammed the brakes right in front of the entrance, threw the car into park, and did the messiest escape I've ever done in my life. I shoved my door open and half fell out, yelling, "Call 911, help! He's trying to take my car!" The guard's posture changed instantly. He moved fast, hand on his radio, eyes locked on the guy. The guy in my back seat hesitated for half a second, like he couldn't believe I'd actually made a scene. Then he bolted out the passenger side rear door and sprinted across the lot. The SUV, which had been creeping along the road by the entrance, rolled forward. Its rear door cracked open and the guy dove in like it was perfectly timed. They were gone before the guard even reached my car. Inside the store, employees stared at my cracked window and my shaking hands and treated me like I'd just walked out of a war. Police came, took my statement, pulled camera footage, and asked me to replay the trip on my phone. The account was brand new. The destination address wasn't a house. It was an empty lot near an industrial park. The detective told me they've seen versions of this. Someone clean-looking in the back seat to control the driver and keep them from calling for help. Another vehicle to box them in, and a plan to get the driver stopped somewhere dark. He asked if the passenger said anything that sounded practiced. I told him about the "we just need the car" line, and he nodded like he'd heard it before. Uber sent me the usual "safety is our priority" emails and refunded the ride. Automatically, like that meant anything. My windshield got replaced, my shoulder bruise healed. The thing that didn't heal was what it did to my brain. For months after, every time a car stopped too close behind me at a light, my stomach would drop like an elevator. I still drive sometimes, but never after midnight, never from office buildings that should be safe, and never anywhere near industrial areas. People think the scariest part is the moment you get hit. It's not. It's realizing how easy it is for someone to use an app and a fake name to put you exactly where they want you, and how fast normal can turn into you're alone and being managed. My name's Maya, and I drove Uber on weekends in 2021 because my day job at a dental office didn't cover rent. I got used to the usual late-night stuff fast. Drunk groups arguing over music, couples crying quietly, people who smelled like cigarettes, and bad decisions. The ride that made me quit started as a normal request. Pick up at a 24-hour pharmacy off a highway access road. Drop off listed as an apartment complex 10 minutes away. The account name was Aaron. Rating fine, nothing weird. When I pulled up, the parking lot was mostly empty except for a few cars by the drive-through window, and one guy standing under the far light pole like he was waiting for somebody who never showed. He started walking toward my car the second I stopped, and I remember thinking, great, wrong person, because he was a man in his mid-30s with a hoodie pulled tight and his hands buried in the front pocket. I cracked the window and said, "Aaron?" He nodded way too fast and leaned in like he wanted to get his face inside my car. "Yeah, Aaron. She ordered it for me," he said. And before I could even decide what to do, he opened the rear door and slid in behind me instead of the passenger side. My stomach dropped a little because I hate when people sit directly behind the driver, and he did it with purpose. Quiet, smooth, like he'd practiced. I told myself not to be paranoid. People order rides for friends all the time. I tapped start ride anyway, because I didn't want to get into an argument in a dark parking lot, and I figured if anything felt off, I'd end it at the first sign. The first sign was that he never spoke again unless it was to correct me. He didn't say hello, didn't ask how my night was, didn't even pretend to be polite. The only sound was his breathing and the plastic crinkle of something in his lap. 2 minutes in, he said, "Turn right here." It wasn't on the route. I answered the way I always do. The app's taking me the fastest way to the address. He didn't raise his voice, but he leaned forward just enough that I felt him close behind my headrest. "Right here," he repeated, slow like I was dumb. I ignored him and stayed on the on-ramp toward the apartments. After another minute of silence, he said, "I just need a quick stop first. Storage units. 10 seconds, I'll tip you." I told him I couldn't add stops unless it was in the app. That's when he laughed, small, breathy, like he'd been waiting for me to say that. "You can. You just don't want to," he said. He started tapping on the back of my seat with 2 fingers, a steady, impatient beat that made my shoulders tighten. I glanced up at the rear view mirror and caught his eyes locked on my face. He wasn't looking at the road. He was studying me. I used the app's safety shield without making it obvious, started audio recording, shared my trip with my sister, and moved my phone into the little cradle where the camera could see it. I didn't call anyone yet because I didn't want to escalate, but my hand was sweating on the wheel. Then he did the thing that finally convinced me this wasn't just a rude passenger. He leaned forward and said, almost casually, "Your plates don't match your registration." I felt cold. "What?" I asked. "I saw the sticker," he said. "Expired. They'll tow you if a cop sees it." My sticker wasn't expired. I knew it wasn't. But he said it with so much certainty that for half a second I doubted myself, and I think that was the point. Right after that, he added, "There's a spot off the frontage road where you can pull over. I'll show you." I said, "No," flat, and kept driving. He went quiet again, and then the tapping stopped. That silence was worse than the tapping. We hit a red light under a street lamp, one of the few bright places on that stretch, and I felt him shift behind me. Before I could look, something thin slid around my neck from behind, like a strap. It wasn't tight yet, just placed there, the way you'd place a leash before you pull. I froze, because my brain couldn't accept what was happening. Then it tightened hard. My vision narrowed instantly. I made this ugly, choking sound and instinctively reached up with my left hand, fingers clawing at whatever it was. It was a lanyard, like the kind people put keys on, and he had it crossed under my chin. My right foot slammed the brake. The car jerked to a stop in the middle of the lane. Horns exploded behind me. The light was still red, and the cross street had cars waiting. So suddenly, we were surrounded in every direction. He yanked again, trying to pull me back into the seat. I remembered my dad's old advice from when I first started driving rideshare. If somebody gets violent, make noise and make witnesses. I laid on the horn with my palm and hit the hazard lights. I started screaming, full volume, not words at first, just sound. I reached down with my right hand and grabbed the metal buckle of my seatbelt. I snapped it up and back like a weapon and felt it connect with something. His wrist, maybe. He hissed, and the pressure on my throat loosened just enough for me to suck in air. The light turned green, and I didn't even think. I hit the gas and cut hard into the nearest turn lane, aiming for the brightest place I could see, a gas station with big windows and cameras, maybe 100 yards away. He started cursing then, breathy and furious like he'd been holding it in. I heard the rear door handle rattle as he tried to get out, but child locks weren't on, so I realized he wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to time it. He didn't want to jump out. He wanted me stopped. I whipped into the gas station lot and parked right in front of the doors, blocking the path like an idiot, but I didn't care. I threw the car into park, grabbed my phone, and got out while I was still moving. The strap snapped loose as I moved forward, and I Ran inside screaming, "Call 911! He tried to choke me! Call 911!" The clerk's eyes went huge. People turned. Somebody actually moved between me and the glass like they thought the guy would follow me in. But he didn't. Through the front windows, I watched him step out of my back seat calmly, like he'd just finished a normal ride, and then walk, not run, across the lot toward the dark edge where the dumpsters were. He disappeared between the buildings. The cops came fast because the station was near the highway. I couldn't stop shaking long enough to explain it in a straight line, and my neck was already bruising. They took my statement, pulled the footage, and had me show them the trip on my app. The strangest part was the account name. Aaron wasn't a regular customer at all. It was a brand new account made that night with a prepaid card. The officer told me that's common when people want anonymity. He asked if the passenger left anything in my car. I went back out with him and looked in the back seat. And that's when I found the thing that made my stomach flip. A second lanyard, identical to the first, tucked under the seat like a spare. I reported the trip to Uber and got the usual copy-paste emails about safety being our priority. A detective called me 3 days later because they found the guy not far from that pharmacy. Apparently, he'd tried the same thing with another driver, but she slammed on the brakes sooner and he'd bolted before he could do much. I never heard his name from the police, and I didn't ask. I didn't want him to feel real in my head. I stopped driving that week. Now when I order rides, I sit in the back and I watch the driver's neck in the mirror, and it makes me feel sick that someone can turn an ordinary app into a hunting tool in 10 minutes.